Okay, I am going to show you how to make this teddy bear, which I'm calling the X-Loom bear, on the X-Loom. Okay? Now, as most of y'all know, I have done a book on loom knitting animals. This bear is actually based on my original loom knit bear on those circular looms. Now what I've done is some translation, and I'm going to explain to you how that's going to kind of work. So if you want to try to take on these patterns onto the X-Loom, you can. In fact, I'm wanting to try my turkey on this because the turkey had internal decreases periodically throughout to get that fan look. It's going to make it so much easier on this loom. And that was supposed to be an advanced pattern, so you'll probably see that one come out this year. Now, all my heads are kind of based off the same thing, so it's just going to be a slight variance, and you will need to use the formula in here because I'm not using the 24 pace. I'm using a 48, which is a simple double of everything. So if you have my book, in here should be how to double a pattern. Okay, so we'll have to get past terminology. Enlarging a pattern. Because it's doubling it, you just times everything by 2 as you're doing it. Okay, so I'm using 48. So as you can see, 1 through 9, I'm doing 18 rows for the back of the head. Well, I'm going to start off with 24 pegs, and I'm going to increase to 18 rows. And what you want to do is, if you're wanting to make another one of these out of this book, and you want to use the X-Loom, you can. I'm gonna teach you how to do that, okay? Because I'm doing everything on a 48 peg. It's decent size. As you can see, this is my hand. This is the comparable to the book, which is an 8 by 11. The back of the head will always work up the same on most of these patterns. Okay, I'm letting you know the back of the head works up the same. Then you have an ear row, like always. Alright, and then you have the face, and then you have the snout. Okay, and there's only going to be slight adjustments to this, but there's no more internal decreasing. You do a regular row for the ear, and then you start your your decreasing. So there's no internal decreasing. No stitches get taken off the loom anymore with this style. Alright, so keep that in mind if you're doing my other patterns, that you can translate them over to the X-Loom, and I'm going to try to explain how to do that easily enough. And so if you have my book, go to the chapter on enlarging a pattern, okay? Because most of this is not going to change much when you go in and start enlarging it and doing things like that. So, and then of course there's a whole designing section, but it's all based off of the bear. And the thing is there's no sewing, okay, except for the head. I've removed the sewing, so I have a certain amount of new techniques that I'm doing. And I'm going to explain how I'm doing that so that you can go about doing it yourself. The body has become more complicated. On some of the patterns, it won't make it too much more. You're going to be opening the leg holes and the arm holes. That's mostly what you're going to be doing. You're not going to be working flat so much. So when, for instance, if you're doing the sheep, you probably will want to just open up the leg areas and then work those in later. So there's no seaming, but I've even figured out a way to do the legs without seaming, okay? And I'm going to explain that too. Alright, so let's get started. That's just telling you this book is not useless to you because this loom came out. This book is still useful to you. And you still have base patterns here you can follow. Alright, you just have to use the formula inside how to double a pattern. And then you have to go in and take a basis of this video on the back of the head and the front and the snout, and how to adjust for the legs and arms and that kind of thing. Alright, so let's get started. We have our actual wedges set up, and what we're going to do is we're going to start with the back of the head like we always do. Okay, if you follow my animal videos, we're going to do this like we always do. We're going to do a drawstring cast on as our start. Alright. Now, I'm going to go behind that first peg and in front. Behind and in front, behind and in front. And you're going to do this all the way around. And now this is a drawstring cast on. Okay, so that's your initial weave. Alright. Okay, now what you want to do is go in, and you'll end up skipping those two and knitting over. Let's see if I can get this in the way you can see it. Knitting over the next one. So you skip those two and knit over the next one. And then you are going in and you are knitting over. See, there's an empty peg. You come over to the stitch you just created with your weave, and you toss that over. And you come over here with, lay the working yarn over the empty peg, toss the bottom loop over the top on the stitch you created on the previous row. You're going to do this all the way around. This is just like if you're working on a round loom. All of it is just like you're working on a round loom, except you have the advantage that you can increase and decrease easily with the 4 wedges. This is the difference. We're almost the way around. And then one more. Alright. Now you should have a stitch on every single peg and ready to work. Alright. And here's the other thing. We're working in just flat knit. Okay, so you see you have a decent sized stuffed animal here. And that's just using a flat knit. Okay? Alright, now we want to get started. If you want to try to calculate how to go about and adjust a pattern for the back of the head or something like that, where you don't have the increase option in there, but you want that smooth back like this has. What I did was I divided my, I did 48 minus, of course, 24, because that's what I have to increase to is 48. So it's 24, of course, because we're doubling the pattern. And what you want to do is you want to take those number of decreases and you want to divide it by 8. Well, of course, that gives you 3. So you're going to have 3 increases using all 4 wedges. So it means you need to find out how much is in a set. So you have 18 rows. So if you're doing 18 rows and you have 3 increases in it, so if you do 18 divided by 3 is 6. So you're going to do 5 rows of knit and 1 decrease. Okay? but I would like to increase a little sooner. So what I'm going to do is go in and do a couple of rows of knit. And no, this should not set me off too much to do this. It just means I need to keep up with my rows, okay? But typically what you'll do is you'll do 5 rows, and then you will go in and you will increase, okay? So you just want to knit your way around the loom for a couple of rows, okay? And basic techniques are still the same when working with a small gauge loom. You're just tossing the bottom loop over when you knit. You're doing the same thing if you're doing a purl. It's sending it up through the bottom. So just because it's a weird shape doesn't mean that you're working any differently on this than you would a round loom. Your round part just got 4 indentions in it is all that happened, okay? So keep that in mind. You can do techniques from the round looms onto this loom. All knits and drawstring cast-ons are still the same, and you can do a Kitchener cast-on, and I'll probably end up showing that later on. You can still do your Kitchener bind-off. Nothing changed just because the shape changed. You can still do everything like normal. Okay, so I finished a row and I need another row completed. Alright, so go ahead and pause the video and complete one more row, and then I'll show you how to do the increase, which is a little bit more complicated than the decrease, but it's well worth learning how to do the increase. Okay, just in case you have like this weird thing going on where it wants to constantly treat it like it's 2, you can just E-wrap that first stitch and toss it over so it quits that, okay? If you're getting that weirdness, and it doesn't throw it off, so you know. Okay, now I need to show you how to increase, and when I say on a row, wedge increase 4 and knit the round, this is what I mean. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to knit, and then you get to your first wedge, alright? And what you're going to do, and I'll try to get close to the camera on this, is you have a previous stitch, which is right here. It should be obvious. It's your first notch, alright? You want to pull that stitch back, alright? I don't think that was the whole thing. There. You want to pull that stitch back. And what you'll see is that you have the stitch here, alright, and you'll have your previous one that you did from the last row sitting there. You're going to take the working yarn, you're going to put over the peg, and then you are going to toss that back over. And normally I would not release that stitch. I'd keep it in hand. Now, your original loop that you had on the peg may sit on top. What you want to do is you want to grab the loop you just created, and you can just slightly tug on it to separate it. Then what you want to do next is you want to place it on the previous peg, alright, and leave it. Now you want to knit the next 2 stitches, okay? There's 1, and there's 2, okay? Now you want to do the same thing, okay? So there is the previous stitch. You want to, and always make sure that the working yarn's on the inside of the loom, and just pull that back. Place that working yarn in front of the peg, and then take and place that stitch back. If you never let go of the stitch, it makes it really fast. Alright, now you want to find your loop you just created, which is right here, because you can pull it and enlarge it. you want to take and put that stitch onto the second peg. Alright? See? So you should have a second stitch on this peg, on the side of this wedge, and then a second stitch on the second peg of the wedge. Then what you want to do is knit the peg you just twin knitted. Alright? Now here's where the increase comes in. You've just created 2 stitches. Now you need to move your wedge. And you're going to move the wedge to the next set of empty pegs. Okay? Then what you want to do is you want to take that top stitch and place it on the empty peg beside the wedge. And you want to place the top stitch on the second peg on the wedge and to that empty stitch. And if you need to, you can go in and snug up that stitch a little, okay, on the end. But that is how you increase out. All right, and I'll show you this again, because it's more complicated, but it is well worth the knowledge to do it, because it's going to make shaping on this loom so much easier. All right. Now, you are here to your first wedge peg on your wedge, and you want to find the previous stitch, and you want to pull it back. Don't release it. Place the working yarn in front of the peg and place that back where you found it. Then find your stitch you just created, which is easy to know because you can make it smaller and larger, and place it onto the previous peg. Then what you want to do is knit the 2 wedge pegs, and then you're going to go to the next peg and you're going to pull the original stitch back, trying not to release it. Place the working yarn in front and then place the original stitch back. Now you'll need to find the stitch you just created, which is right here, and you're going to move it over to the second wedge peg. Then you're going to knit this stitch beside the second wedge peg. You're going to move the wedge to the next set of pegs, like this. Tighten it back down. Take the second stitch on this one, move it to that empty peg, and the second stitch on this one, and move it to the empty peg, and you may want to snug it up a little. Okay? That is an increase. Alright? And you're just knitting your way over to the next increase. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you again how to do it. Keep your working yarn on the inside of the loom when you go to do this process. Take that previous stitch, pull it back, place the working yarn in front of the peg, and then replace the stitch. This is what I call a twin knit. Okay, and it showed up in my sock book, but I figured out it was a really nice way to increase using this technique. Alright, and you're going to move it to the previous peg. Okay, then you're going to knit the 2 pegs. And what it does is it completely removes that whole look that I find happens when you increase on a loom. Okay, and I don't like it. Alright, so there's your previous stitch. Pull it back, try not to release it. Place the working yarn in front of that peg, and then re-release that stitch. You now have 2 stitches on a single peg. Move that over to the previous peg, and knit. Then move your wedge to the next empty set of pegs. Take your stitch you created over here and move it, and your stitch you created over here and move it, and you've just done another increase of 2 stitches. Okay. Knit your way over to the next peg, and I'll just showed you how to increase. Okay, so pull your previous stitch back, don't release it from your hook, wrap the working yarn in front of that peg, toss that back. Now when you do that, your original stitch may sit on top. You occasionally have to go in and fish out your original stitch, okay, to your new stitch. But remember, it's one that moves, so you'll always know which one it is. Okay, and you can snug it up if you'd like. Then you're going to knit the pegs on the wedge. Then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to pull that previous stitch back to do a twin knit. Place that in front, and remember, you may have to fish out the stitch you just created, not a problem. Move it to the previous peg and then knit that peg. This is a 4 wedge decrease, which is a simplified way of doing the row, okay? If it gets more complicated than just doing an increase or decrease where you're doing just 1 or something, then I'll go in and explain how to fix that, okay? And you might want to go in and tighten up the stitches if you think they're a little loose, okay? Not a problem. And knit 1. Alright, we have just increased this by 8 pegs. Okay? We've done 3 rows up to this point. Now, what you want to do is go in and start this as like a set. Okay, so you've just increased. Go ahead and do 5 rows. Increase 5 rows. And then when you get to your after your last increase, because you have 3, just finish to what row 18 is. Okay? So now we're just going to go in, and for every, and I'm going to tell you this now, for every increase you do, you will need to do a regular row. Alright, because that sets the stitch in place. So even if you're wanting to do a really fast increase, keep in mind you want to do a regular row between an increase, even if it's just 1, okay? And I'll show you how that looks if you're doing just 1 row between an increase and a decrease. I did on the foot on this pattern, which you will see. But you'll need to go in and do you'll need to do 5 rows of knit. Okay, so pause the video, get 5 rows of knit, and we'll come back and we'll do another increase. Now, if you want to see what a fast increase looks like, this section right here is a fast increase. It's where I've increased and I did a row. And you see what it does, what it looks like. Okay, and then this is a fast decrease over here. Alright, so that kind of gives you an idea on that. Alright, so pause the video, get your 5 rows done, and then we'll go on from there. Okay, we've done our 5 rows, and we need to repeat our increase. And I'm not going to go all the way through this like I did first, because you're just going to repeat what we just did. You're going to knit up to those wedges and work that way. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to get it started, and then I'm going to tell you to go in and complete your 18 rows. Okay, so we're going to knit up to our first wedge peg. We're going to pull that original stitch back, wrap our working yarn over the front. Then we're going to need to fish out the stitch we just created. Okay, and then we're going to move that to a previous peg, and then we're going to knit to the 2 wedge pegs. Then we're going to pull the previous stitch back on the next working peg, place the working yarn over, and then release the stitch back. And then you're going to put that extra stitch you just made onto the previous peg, and then knit over. Okay, and then what you want to do is move it to the next available pegs, move the stitch over to the next peg, and then move the stitch over to the next peg, and you can snug that stitch up a little bit. Okay, and then you want to knit your way over to the next wedge and increase again. So at this point, I'm going to tell you to continue this process. Alright, you're going to increase all the pegs, then you're going to do 5 rows, then you're going to increase all the pegs, and then all that should be left is 3 rows to complete 18 rows. Okay, so pause the video and increase 5 rows, increase 3 rows, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to do the ears on the bear. I have finished my rows, and as you can see, I've already pulled in my drawstring, and this is what you should have. Okay, so what we need to do next is we need to do our ears. Okay, and I have my notes here. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to knit 12. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Alright, there's going to be 2 types of ways that you can do the ears. Okay, typically I do it one way where I don't reattach anything or sew anything. I'm going to show that way first, and then I'm going to show another way second. So one ear is going to be done one way and the other ear is going to be done the other way, so that you have the options. I'm going to do this the same with the limbs. I'm going to show you how to go in and reattach, and then I'm going to show you how to go in if you want to sew on a limb rather than do this method that I'm going to be doing here. So I'm going to be trying to give you 2 options. If you don't feel comfortable doing one option, you can do the other option, because one option requires sewing, but it may be easier. The other option is less sewing, but it may be more complicated. But if you've done the 10 stitch, doing that is not difficult. So the thing is with the harder one, if you've done the 10 stitch, then you know slipping that first stitch and knitting the last stitch creates a chain, adding the chain back. So if you're used to a 10 stitch, you may want to go ahead and do the method I'm going to show with the ears and some of the other methods that I'm going to be doing, okay? Alright, so the next 8 pegs will be working ear, and it's a short row series, alright? So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. Now, my notes, it says to knit 8 stitches for 8 rows. Okay, and that's back and forth. Alright, so if it's in parentheses, it's a flat area done in a series of short rows. So what you can do is start knitting from the last peg you finished and knit back 8. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Alright, that's row 2. Let's get on row 3. You start on the peg you finished and knit 8 stitches back the other direction. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now this is row 3. Now what we want to do is row 4. So we're going to go back the other direction. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's row 4. Now we want to do row 5. And so we have 1. Okay. So now that we are on row 5, we're going to do row 6. And then this is row 7. And then this is our last row back. And then we're going to be creating the curve in the ears. Okay. So here's row 8. Okay. Now we're going to work 7 pegs for a single row. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright, now we're going to knit back, and we're going to knit back 6. Okay? Starting with the peg we finished with. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, Then we have a row where we knit 5, starting with the peg we finished with. So we're going to go knit 5. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to knit 4 back the other direction, starting with the peg we just finished with. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're going to knit 5 stitches, starting with the peg we finished with. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we're going to go back and we're going to knit 6 stitches, starting with the one we finished with. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then what we're going to do is knit 7, starting with the peg we finished with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Alright, now we're to knit 8 for 9 rows. Alright. So what we want to do is we're going to go back and start working on the original 8 that we started with, and we're going to do that for 9 rows. So you should be ending up back over here. So this is row 1. And this is row 2. And then row 3. And row 4. And row 5. And row 6. And row 7. 2 more rows, and then we'll be ready to do our next step. Now you can skip this step, but it means you'll have to sew up the ear section, what I'm fixing to show you. And if you want to sew up the ears, then you can skip the last row and just move on to the next ear. That makes it even easier if you choose not to do this. But as I said, if you want to save yourself sewing, it does mean things get a little bit more complicated. So if you don't mind sewing up the ears later, you can continue on to the next ear, and you would knit 8, and then you start on the next 8 pegs for the ear. Okay, this is if you don't mind sewing up the ear, you can skip these next steps and move over to the next ear. Okay, alright. Now if you don't want to sew up the ear, you knit the 9th row, and then you're going to bring your original loops back on all 8 pegs. What this is going to do is going to make an ear. Okay. Alright. Now, what you should see is an ear. See? you have a short row series, and there is your ear. Alright, well, what we want to do is we want to close up the base of it. Alright, and here is what I tend to do. Alright, I go into my previous stitch that's not been done, and I find that bridge, and then I go to the notch that's below that bridge, okay, which is this, and then I add it back to the peg. Okay, I find my next notch, which is right here, then there's a stitch below it right there, and I pick it up and I put it on to the loom. And then there's another notch, and I go to the next one that's below it and pick it up and put it onto the loom. And I'm going to do this all the way around, okay? Alright. There's your notch. And add that back. And what this does is it closes off the base of the ear. Alright. So that you don't have to worry about that. And then when you get to this last one, just to make sure you get it closed off, you can go to the unused one and then go to the base, which worked out. Okay. So now you should have 2 stitches on those 8 pegs. Now what you want to do is you want to go in and knit those 2 together, and you'll have just created an ear and closed it off so that there's no need to sew it later. But you will have an edge that may try to curl and puff out more. If you want a flatter ear, I'm going to show you how to do that. But this is the next easiest version. Alright, so what you want to do is you want to go in and knit the 2 pegs together. You may have to toss 1 stitch over at a time in order to get this, and you may want to loosen up the stitch as you go. Alright, and this is version 2 of how to do an ear. Alright, there's always more than one way to do something, and in this there's multiple ways. The ear is done, and now we're ready to go to our next ear. So we're going to go to the next peg and we're going to knit over 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And this is the space between the ears. Alright, now we want to do the other ear, which is going to be done in the next 8 pegs. Alright, so this is start of peg 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I'm going to show you the third method on doing an ear. Now, if you didn't decide to do the bringing the original loop back and move over, this is where your other ear is supposed to be. And you just do the same process we did over here, and then you just knit your way back to finish it if you don't want to do the bring the original loop back and knit both together. This is the method where the ear is completely closed off. There's no side holes, okay, so it's not going to look puffy. Alright, so we just knitted our last stitch, and we're going to slip that first stitch and knit over to 7, which still keeps you with a total of 8 pegs you're working with. So we slip that first one and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. Alright, we knitted that last stitch. We know we're going to slip that first stitch and knit over 7. But you're still working over a total of 8 pegs. And what you're creating is a chain on the side of your ear. Alright, and this is going to be row 3. Alright, and you're just going to continue the process of knit the last stitch, slip the first stitch between the 8 pegs. Alright, so now that we've done that, that is row 3. And this is going to be row 4, slipping that first stitch and knitting 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We're knitting that last stitch, slipping the first. So that is row 4. And you're going to do this process where you're knitting the last stitch, slipping the first stitch. So you're going to do this 4 more rows to make a total of 8 rows. Just like we did with the first one, we're just doing a slight alteration. Okay, this is my last row on the sets of 8, and now it's time to work the curved part. And we're going to work it the same. We're going to slip the first stitch, but to keep in mind, you're still working over a total of 7 stitches. That includes the slip. So you're going to slip that one, which counts as 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You've knitted that last stitch. You're going to slip the first stitch, but it's going to count 6 total. So that slip counts as 1. And this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright, now we have 5 next. Slip that first one, count it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Slip that first one, count that one as 1, and we're doing 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start working our way back out. So we're going to slip that first one and count 5. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, we're going to slip that first one and knit over 6, counting the slip, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Alright, we're going to knit it back over 7, slip that first one, count it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And here's where it's going to start working a little differently, okay? You've just created chains on the sides of your ear. Alright, so what we want to do is we want to come to the opposite side and we want to look at our chains. And so you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, and you'll see a connector here. Alright, so what you want to do is you want to put that first chain that you see here back on. So you want to put that first chain, and I would suggest the outer edge of it, okay? So you don't have a ridge that shows up. And what you're going to do is you're going to slip that first stitch, knit your way around, and then when you get to that, you want to purl it together, and that'll give you a really smooth edge, okay? So you want to purl the two together if you're choosing to do this method. You can knit the two, but it's going to give you a chain around the edging, okay? So what you want to do is you want to go in and purl the two together. 2 stitches together. Okay. Take them off, put that on. Then what you want to do is go over here and find your first chain, which is right here, and you want to put that outer edge on, okay, which is the one facing furthest away from you when it comes to the chain. Okay, slip that first stitch over here and knit your way over, and then purl the 2 stitches together. And you're going to continue this, adding the chain and purling the 2 together, and until you have your 9 rows, okay? And it should work up correctly. Okay, you come over to the other side. You're going to find your next chain, which is right here. Okay, and you're going to bring that up and pull it onto the peg. And this is going to completely close in your ear. You'll have created an entire appendage. So slip that first stitch and knit your way over and purl the 2 stitches together. Okay. Alright, now you want to purl the 2 stitches together. Okay? And place them to the loom. Alright, now you want to go to the other side and you want to pick up the next chain. You may have to pull it out a little bit. And there is my next one. I'm going to place it onto the peg. And then I'm going to slip that first stitch and knit over and purl it together. So go ahead and continue this process until you have no more chains, and you should have 9 rows. You have 1 more chain to add. Okay. And you can knit your way over. purl the two together. Okay. Now, what you want to do is go ahead on your last one and knit your way over, and then you'll bring your original loops back and knit the two together all the way around. And then to finish the row, you will knit your way back to your starting point. So what you want to do now is bring your original loops back, and remember, you go over and find the notch and bring it up. Oops, put that in the way. Bring that up. Then you will find the notch, find the next stitch, and bring it up. Notch, next stitch, bring it up. Notch, next stitch, bring up. And sometimes on this last one it can be a little bit more challenging because it's a little tighter. You can do it in reverse if you want. If you think it'll be easier to do it in reverse, you can. And last one, and then what we want to do is follow our chain, find our stitch, and put that on. Okay, then what you want to do is go in and knit the two stitches together and knit your way to the beginning. And then at this point we will be knitting flat, so we have an easier way to stuff our head. Alright, it's the only little seams that you have to make, only if you want to. It's entirely up to you. I'm giving y'all options. Okay, we've now completed 2 ears, as you can see, in 2 different ways. Alright, now what you'll want to do is you'll want to knit your way, which should be 12, back to your starting point. Okay, you are now ready to start the area of the face, and this is where the benefit of this loom comes in. There's no internal decrease. You're just going to decrease as you go along. Now normally we would do 6 rows and then an internal decrease, but because we're doubling it, we're doing 12 rows, and we're going from 48 to 24, which is half. So you're going to divide that up to where you're going to need to do 3 decreases. And what it is going to be 4 rows per decrease rather than the 6. So what you're going to do is you're going to do 3 rows knit, and then you're going to decrease. 3 rows knit, and then decrease. 3 rows knit, and then decrease. Alright, and you're going to do that 3 times, and that should give you, and that's a pretty standard for my face. The snout is where it would change depending on the pattern you're using. So at this point we're going to be working flat. We're going to be working back and forth because we need an opening underneath the head in order to be able to stuff. So what you want to do is slip that first stitch the last stitch you just knitted, and work back the other direction, and you're going to knit back and forth for 3 rows. Okay, that finishes the first row. Now we want to do the second row, and we knitted that last stitch, and we're going to be going back the other direction. So, and slip that first stitch because you want a nice chain you can see to sew up later. Alright, so you just want to knit your way around. Now I do not include these slips that I'm talking about in the written. If You can still sew it up without the chains in there, seeing the chains and everything. It just makes it a lot easier to see what you're doing. Okay, but I do not include those in there on the written. So go ahead and complete, this is row 2, and then you're going to come back around for row 3. Pause the video, get these 2 rows done, and then I'll show you the decrease. Okay, it's time to do our decrease row, and I'll tell you right now, decreasing is super easy. What you want to do is take and move all your wedges in one slot, see? Move it in one slot or to the next corresponding pegs. Move it in one slot to the next corresponding pegs, and move it in one slot to the next corresponding pegs. Really easy. Take those stitches, move them on to the wedge peg. So take that extra stitch, move it onto the wedge pegs, and take the extra stitch, move it onto the wedge pegs, and move it onto the wedge peg, and you have just decreased. All you got to do is when you go to knit around, you knit the 2 stitches together, and this is your row 4 of a 4-row set. Slip that first stitch, knit everything. It's got 2 stitches on it, knit it together. This is your 4-row set. So what you're going to do is you're going to knit 3 rows straight, back and forth, no specialty to them, and then 1 decrease row. And you're going to do this for a total of 3 sets. So once you complete this set, you have 2 more sets to do. 3 rows of knit, 1 row of 4 wedge decreases. Alright? Pause the video and get that much done, and then we'll work on the snout. Okay, I have finished the front of my face on the bear, which is this area. And now there will be the snout area. Okay. As you can see, we have the opening. We're back down to our smallest we can get, and you can see your ears in the back of your head a lot better. Okay, you really won't be able to see the decreases until you get most of your snout done. Okay, so the snout's easy. It's done circularly. Normally you do 6 rows on the smallest one, but because we're working on the X-Loom, we're going to double it, and normally you knit flat, but you don't have to. So we're going to double it. We're going to do 12 rows, and we're going to go in the round. Okay, so we're going to start working in the round, and you're going to do 12 rounds of knitting in the round. Okay, and then I will show you a method to drawstring off. Okay, so what you'll want to do is go ahead and pause the video and get your 12 rounds of knitting done in the round. Get 12 rows done, and then I'll show you how to come back and do the drawstring bind off that I do. Okay, and then we'll finish the head up, and this will conclude this part of the video, but then you'll need to move on to the body. I just finished my snout, and I'm ready to drawstring off. So I'm going to show you how to drawstring off the last 24 pegs for a smooth finish. What you want to do is skip that first stitch, knit the bottom stitch over, and pull the tail through. Skip, knit, skip, and knit, skip, and knit all the way around. Okay, we're back around where we should be, and you're going to skip that peg and move to the next one, and that's going to give you where you can pull. Okay, you'll see where the longer section is. Alright, so you're going to skip that one, and that should be your last one pulled off. And now you're just going to take the rest of the stitches off. You can do this with a sock as well but I don't like the extra bulk if you were to do this method. So for a sock, I mean, you can do this method, but I wouldn't. But this is how I do it for the stuffed animal, because it doesn't matter if there's a little bulky spot. You're not going to have to feel it, and you're not going to have to see it. And the last one. Okay. And pull through the bottom. Now, I'm going to show you the easy way to do this. Alright. Most of these have a certain length to them, okay? But you'll see where you finished. There's one that's longer in length than the others, and that's going to be this one here. Okay, if I can get it to focus. Okay, you see how these are a certain length and that one's longer, and it's just right above the tail? Well, you're going to pull it, and you're going to pull it from this side. Now, if you'd like to go the other way, you're going to pull from this side, but the direction I go, counterclockwise, you're going to pull that side. So you pull that side first, and then you pull your tail. Okay? And now what you see is a very smooth snout. Alright? So now what we're to is stuffing and adding eyes and that kind of thing, and finishing up, closing up the front and back. So we're at the finishing touches of the head. So I'm going to get my supplies and show you how to finish up the head of this bear. Okay, it's time to finish up our head. Now I have a safety nose and some safety eyes, and I couldn't tell you the millimeters because I purchased a kit off of eBay, and if you're wanting to get a kit where it has like the gold and the green and the brown and the black and the white eyes, where you get noses as well, I did get it offline, and it comes in a variety of sizes, so you're not pigeonholed as to sizes on your eyes. So I would always suggest a multi-pack kit. You can kind of go with what you want to do. But I do usually find them on eBay. What you want to do is you want to type in the search engine safety eyes, and you'll get quite a selection of different eyes you can use. Okay, so I pulled out a black set of eyes because I'm making a polar bear basically. I'm going to do a seasonal bear. And the ears. Okay, well here is the ear that you didn't close up. Alright, and here is the ear you did. You can't tell a whole lot of difference, but you know, you can stick your finger in that ear. You may not want that, okay? Alright, let's close things up. I've already threaded my needle with my tail, and I'm going to stick it through the middle and pull the needle through. And there's a very small hole to work with, alright? And I'll pull that as tight as I can. And because this is a stuffed animal, it does not have to be neat on the inside. You're not going to see it. So I'm going to pull it through just enough to where I can do 2 half knots. Close it off. 1 and 2. Alright, now I'm going to cut the end because I'm going to use this to do my eye cinching, as I call it. Alright, now we got our basic nose going on there, and when you stuff it, that's really going to smooth out. Okay, I'm going to save this for later, and I'm going to take care of the back of the head. Now, we're still going to need to do our star method like we do on our regular bear. Okay, so go ahead and thread the needle, and I would suggest you get one with a really fine point to do this. Okay, now we're gonna stick the needle through the hole, and we're going to do our star shape on the inside so you don't see it on the outside. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to pull this as tightly as possible to close it up. Then you want to go across, send the needle through the stitch, then come down over here and send a needle through the stitch, go across from there, send a needle through the stitch, and go across here and send a needle through the stitch and tighten. And what you'll find is that closes off the back of the head. And then you're just going to send that through, leave you a space, and just do 2 half knots. And that closes off the back of your head. Now, next thing you need to do is place in your safety eyes. Yes, I hate personally doing it this method too, because I haven't got it stuffed. You can stuff it and preset it if you'd like, but here's the best guide. Alright, you can kind of see where your last decrease is, and they're even on both sides. So you can see there's the base, and there's your 2. See, you can either choose the column furthest away or in, but you want to stick around that last decrease and shove it in there as best you can. Okay, so you got one eye set. Alright, now you want to look in over here, and there is your decrease, and your center column is here, so I chose the furthest one way on this side. I'm going to choose the furthest way on the other side, and this is where you can set your eyes. Now, you can set your eyes any darn way you want. This is just how I do it, and it mostly follows the line with the inner ear. Okay, and that should be even. You should see that they're fairly even. Okay, you can go ahead and do the snap ends. And then what I like to do is find where my center point is for my nose. And looks like it's going to be about here, because there is your drawstring. Okay. So the placement of the facial features can be a challenge. Okay, but you can kind of place them and see that they line up the way they should, and it looks like they do. So I'm going to go ahead and start snapping all of them in, which, keep in mind, this will be a challenge. You may want a flat surface to be able to snap these in. I'm going to push it down as far as you can. Okay, you want to find your other eye. I will not lie, these can be a trick to put on. Okay, now you got your safety eyes in and you got your safety nose in. You're going to start stuffing, okay? And we'll do the eye cinching after we already get most of the stuffing in, okay? That'll make it a lot easier. I'd go ahead and start stuffing your nose. And then stuffing the rest of it. You want to stuff the sides, stuff it fairly firmly because you flat knitted this. It should be fairly tight and you should be able to stuff it pretty firmly. You will still need to do a certain amount of shaping to get what you want, okay? This is not let you escape shaping. Now, the eyes stick out maybe a little right now, but we're going to fix that. But you can see that it still gives it a nice good shape. You're basically ready to start getting those eyes cinched in. Now what you want to do is pick back up your scrap yarn and put you a slip knot in. Okay. And what you want to do now is you want to go through the back of the head, okay? And that way your little knot thing here will hide. And what you want to do is you want to go up under, and you want a fairly long needle for this. You want to go up under the eye. And pull that needle through. And then you want to go back up under the eye and back through the middle of the head. Okay, and then what you want to do is grab that slip knot and pull. Alright, and you see you've just created a nice cinch area on that eye. Well, you want to do the same thing on the other eye. You want to send that through, find the base of the eye, the bottom, send the needle through, send the needle back through, and then back through the center of the back of the head. And you can see it fixes that kind of bulked out look. And when you think you like the level of cinching, which I do, then you're going to knot it on the back, and then you'll crochet, get your crochet hook and pull those ends in. Okay. And that is how you do an eye cinching. Now we need to add a mouth to our bear. So you want to get you a strip of black. And I'm going to go through on the back side to start this. And what you want to do is find kind of the bottom corner here. This is all eyeing. This is not exact science here. Pull that through and stop. Okay. Then we're going to put it through just above our drawstring area, and then what you want to find is your matching side, and it looks like that. Okay, then you want to go up as close to the base of the nose as you can get. There. Then you want to go through the center, and then you can go up and find your eyeball area where you want to add an eyebrow. Then what you want to do is send through a little, and then send back through, and then send through to the other side. And it looks like you're trying to line up to more of the lower end here. Pull through, and then go up and then put back through. And see if it's about what you want. Now the reason why we didn't knot the end is if it's not, then you can always take it out. Okay. That looks about what I want. And when you've done that, you can snip the end. And shove that up in there. Alright. Now what I like to do, you don't have to because you're just going to sew the head on, is I like to sew the head up under the bottom. Okay. You can cut you some extra. And I like to do a slip knot. Okay. Send it through the back. Send it through the slip knot. Pull. Now shove your tail up in there. Okay. Now here's where I like to follow the chains I created by opening it back up. Keeps your stitching even. And there is your head. And you can go in, do a single knot, and send it back through. Pull down a little. There we go. Alright. Now all you should need to do is take a crochet hook and pull those in, and you have completed your head. And we're ready to move on to our body.